Hello everyone. So this is Mohammad Atif, and in this lecture we will learn about embedded login in React. So basically there are a couple of articles where you can learn about the universal login process in Auth0, but today we will be working on the embedded login. So as you know that Auth0 works in two different way. First is a universal login that basically help you to perform all the authentication stuff after redirection from your website to the Auth0 server, and the other is basically the embedded login. Embedded login is a feature that basically allows that you can perform all the authentication related stuff in your own website using your own forms. So yeah, so today we will be working on the embedded login, and for this one we obviously we will have to first create an application in the Auth0. So what I have to do is first create an application. I already have done just for the time saving purpose. So what you have to do is to first create an application, choose single page application, then you will create app, and then it will just ask you to choose the platform. So we are using the React. So yeah, so this is just the process. But as I said, I already have set up an application, so I will go through the settings that I have already done for my application, right? So I will delete this as well. So yeah, so let me just delete this one. And yeah, so this is the application that I just created for this demo. And the most important thing that you have to do here is to add some values. So as we are in localhost, so our allowed callback URL will be something like this. So this is basically the URL where Auth0. So since we are using the embedded login, so behind the scene Auth0 create a canvas for us, and whenever we basically log in, it first go to the Auth0 server instead of redirect, but behind the scene it does it go to the Auth0 server and return some auth tokens, and we have to verify that token. So we have to mention where we will verify those token when we will get redirected back to our website from the Auth0. So this is the path where I will first verify all the token in case of the user authentication, right? So when the user will log in first time, and it the our website will hit a request to the Auth0 server behind the scene, and then it will allow the permission, and then it will redirect back to this route. So we will definitely create this route in our React application. So if I show you, I already have created a route for this one. So you can see here, this is the authenticate, and this is the authenticate path, and the component that I actually created for this is post authenticate. So we will add more stuff in a couple of minutes here. The next thing is the logout URL. Obviously we have to mention when the user will log out, where it will redirect after that. So where the user will redirect after the logout. So this is the URL where we will redirect the URL. We have to mention which web regions are allowed, and the most important thing is that you have to mention the course. So we have to allow all the origin, all the path from 3000, since we are in localhost. If you are working 3001 or 8000, so you have to mention those path here, otherwise it will block your request, right? So this is all done. The next thing what you have to do is to I think that's all necessary thing. The next thing that we have to do here is to go into the authentication and database, and we have to choose the password policy. And just for the demonstration purpose, I actually used this one as minimum 8 characters, right? So instead of this strong validation, just for the demonstration purpose, I use this just 8 characters validation for the password, right? And once you done, just go down and the save changes, right? So these all are the settings from the Auth0, and the next thing we have to use is the Auth0-JS. So this is something that we will be using for embedded login. So here is all the documentation, and what you have to do is to first install it, right? So just copy that and go to the terminal and paste it here, right? So I already have installed this, so it will not take too much time for me at least. And the next thing what you have to do is let me just restart again. And next thing you have to do here is to go to the services, create a folder here in the source file named as the services, and create a file auth0.service.ts, right? auth0.service.ts. So obviously we have to create an instance, right? So I already have done some stuff just to save our time. So what you have to do is to import the auth0, right? And before creating an instance, we must have to have all the necessary variables, right? So for the variables, what you have to do is to carefully go into the source folder, not outside of the source folder. Inside the source folder, create a config.ts file. Yeah, so config.ts file will contain all our variables, right? So inside this file I have added all the variables here. So first of all, the variable name is auth0 domain. So this is the domain that is actually dedicatedly assigned to us by the auth0. So where we can find that domain? So we can go back to our auth0 dashboard inside the application, that we created, and here we have the domain, right? So just copy that and paste it here, right? So the next thing is the client ID. So the client ID is very important to initialize the instance. So here is the client ID, just copy that and paste it here, right? And the next thing is basically the auth0 login redirect URI. So this is the URL where the user will redirect back once it will create a request for the login, that I just explained earlier, that when the user will log in first time, for the very first time, it auth0 will ask for the permission, and when it will give the permission, it will redirect back to the application. So this is the path that will be used for the redirection, right? The next thing is basically the realm. Realm is basically the database here. So the database that will be used for all the authentication related stuff, right? So the database name here is basically the username password authentication. So you can find the database here, right? Inside the authentication databases, and yeah, so this is the database name, username password authentication, right? So you can just copy that name and paste it here, right? And the next thing is basically the scope. So the scope here will be OpenID, email, and the profile. And the login, we are using the token based response. So obviously we will have to mention that what kind of the policy we will be using to authenticate the user, right? So when the user will first time login, and the auth0 server will send us some token or code. So here we are using the token for the verification stuff, right? And here is basically the logout URI. So alright, so obviously you don't have to mention all these variables, this sensitive information here, but just for the demonstration purpose I actually mentioned all information here. Instead you have to create an env file and add all the sensitive information inside the env. Alright, so this is these all the necessary information that we need to create an instance, and then we have to go to the services auth0 the service.es, and inside here just create the instance by importing the auth0 from auth0-js. And what you have to do is to just create an instance by doing new auth0 dot web auth. So for you have to actually pass the domain, and the domain here is basically the auth0 domain, and the client ID is basically the client ID that is this one, the client ID for my auth0 dashboard application. And the scope is that we basically mentioned here: open ID, email, and profile. Alright, so this is the instance that we just created for the auth0, right? And the next thing what you have to do is to obviously create some forms, right? So for that I already have created few forms, login and the registration form. So basically I created this form. So I just created actually this form just for time saving purpose. So here if I go to the login form, that is just a simple login form. So there are the two input fields, like one is for the email and one is for the password, and the other is where, and here is just a submit button, right? So I already created a state to hold the form like email and the password, and there is an on change handler, right? So I actually used all the TypeScript here. So it's your choice. If you are using the plain JavaScript, then you can just ignore all the types related stuff like this one, login form interface, and all these typing for the function parameter, right? So all good. So similarly I have created a form for the registration as well. So you can see here this is just a simple form with the email and the password, and I am not using any confirm password here. So the idea is basically to learn the auth0 embedded process, right? All right, so yeah, so basically this is all good. Let's do some amazing stuff from our side. So this is login. So first we have to do is to just create a user, right? So for this one let me just create a new user. So this is the registration form, and what we have to do is to, since we are basically have attached on submit handler here, and it will give us the information, the user information. So let me just test it. So, and if I just go to the console log, so you can see here, so here is the email and here is the password, right? So yeah, so basically we will add the registration stuff right here, and yeah, so let's start this. So first of all, what we have to do is to get the instance that we just created in the auth0 server. So this is the instance that we just created from here, and auth dot, and here is basically a method, I think, auth dot client dot. So this is basically auth dot client, the auth dot sign up. Sorry, I think auth dot sign up. Yeah. So auth dot sign up. So it actually takes two parameter. One is first the DB sign up options, that includes basically your email, password, and the second is basically the callback function. So once the registration process is either successful or failure, then it will go to the second callback parameter, right? So what we have to do is here, first of all, mention all the necessary information like email. So the email is basically the user dot email, password is basically the user dot password, and the third important parameter here is basically the connection, right? So the connection is basically the database, and we already have created a variable for this one. So this is auth0 realm, right? And so so this is the first parameter. So if I just do some indentation, so this is going to be our first, right? And then just add a comma, comma, and then the second parameter is basically the callback function, right? So callback function is we have first of all the error. So you can see here the first parameter that we will receive is the error, right? So error colon auth0 auth0 error or null, and the second inside the callback first parameter is basically the error, and the second is basically the result parameter, right? So result colon any, right? Yeah. So what actually this callback says, so if this process is successful, then it will go inside this callback function, and it will give us either the error or result, right? So in order to check that if either the authentication registration process is successful, we just have to check if there is an error, if error, right? And then we have console.log, oops, registration failed, right? And we can write the error as well, yeah, and we just return from here, right? So we don't need to execute the further statement, right? But if there is no error, if this is null, then what we have to do is to get all the information from this result. So this result is basically contains all the necessary information about the created user, right? So then we can say console.log user registration successful, right? And we can write result here, yeah. Okay, all right, so let's try this one. So hopefully it will work. So inside the registration, so let me add any user here. So authif@gmail.com, and the password is basically password, right? So let's open network tab, register. Yeah, perfect. So the response that we actually created is this is the user ID, and here is basically the email verified, since email is not yet verified, and the email that we just used here is the authif@gmail.com, right? Perfect. So this is the registration process. So what next we have to do is to first is to basically login, right? So with this email we have to do the login. So in order to login, we have to first create the login component. I already have created that, and so all the state management and handler is already there. So we have to only do the auth0 related stuff, right? So when the user will hit submit button, it will call on submit, and it will give us this user. So let's test this one. So inside the so just let me log in, yeah. So here you can see it will give us the user. So just like if I do Atif, yeah. So from here we have to do the login related stuff, like we have to log in the user using the embedded login, right? So what we have to do is the process is fairly very simple. So what we have to do is to just use the auth dot login method, auth dot login, and inside this just like in the register method, we have to pass first some options, and then there is a callback. The callback is same like in the registration process, right? So the options will go first, and there will be the second parameter, that is basically the callback. And the callback first it give us the error, like error colon auth error or null, and the second is basically the result, right? And so we can easily determine if there is an error, then console.log, oops, login failed, right? And we can log the error, right? And if the login is successful, then we can log the user, right? So there will be login successful console.log result, right? So this is the callback, and here we will have to add the options that basically we want the auth0 to authenticate, right? So first of all, the option will be the username, right? So this is going to be the user dot email, and the second is password, that is going to be the user dot password, and the third is going to be the realm is basically the database that we already have mentioned here. And the fourth one is basically the redirect URI, and the redirect URI is going to be the auth0 login redirect URI, right? And the last one is going to be the response type, and response type is going to be the auth0 login response type, right? So one important thing that I have to actually explain here is basically this redirect URI. So redirect URI here is basically this one, right? So as I mentioned in the very beginning, that when the user will first time log in, it will, the auth0 will ask some permission, right? So when the user will assign the permission, grant the permission, it will redirect us back to the website with some necessary tokens, right? So this is the URL where we will be redirected back. So at this URL we already have added another component, this one post authenticate, right? And this does nothing, so we will come back here in a couple of minutes. So let's try first this process, the login process. Yeah. So I think this is all good. So we have auth.login, username, password, realm, redirect URI, response, right? Okay, so all good. So let's try this one. So atif at the rate of gmail.com, and there is password. Perfect. So this is the process that I actually was explaining before, that now auth0 is asking for the permission. So this is basically asking that would you want to allow this user to give permission to this application that we just created here. So this is the application my app. So you can see here, so this is the authentication permission process. So my app is requesting access to your account, right? So once I will click accept, so it will redirect us back to the same URL that I actually mentioned in the redirect URI, right? So I will first accept it, right? So yeah, so as you can see here, so here is basically, this is the URL where we actually redirected, and this is basically all the access token and all the necessary information that we want to use, that auth0 provided us to verify this user and get all the necessary information like access token, user profile, etc., right? All right, so at this step we have done we have done registration, we have done login, but we still not able to get the original user information and access token. So for this one, what we have to do here is to inside the component that basically where it is actually redirected like authenticate. So at this path we have created a component, this one post authenticate, right? So at this component we basically receive this all information, right? So this all information contains everything that we need to authenticate the user, right? So what we have to do here is to first grab all this information and verify the user, right? So to do that, the process is very simple. What actually we have to do is to first catch all this hash information and do some magic stuff, right? So let's start. So what we have to do is to first catch this all the hash related stuff To do this, first we have to actually use a hook like use location is equal to const location is equal to use location, right? And inside the use callback, use effect, inside the use effect we have to bind this location, and we have to catch all the necessary information from the hash and verify the user. So what we have to do is to we are basically adding dependency for the location, right? So this location will include all the necessary information, and if we do have hash, like if location dot hash, if this contains the hash, for example, if I just do some console log here, console dot log, yes it has, else so dot console dot log, no we don't have, right? So in order to demonstrate, like you can see here we have the hash here, so it gives us the yes it has, right? But if I remove all the hash related content from here and refresh this page, so you can see here this there is no hash, no we don't have, right? So what we have to do here is to uh, first of all catch the hash, right? And then we have to decode all this hash and get the necessary information, right? So let's create another function like const process hash, and this function will do all the magic stuff, like it will contain a hash string like hash colon string, and we will call this function from here process hash location dot hash, right? So inside this function what we have to do is to use the same instance, auth instance. So first of all, auth dot parse hash, so there is a function parse hash, and what basically it takes a key named as a hash, and so hash key will we have to assign this one hash. So since both are the same, so we can just assign this like this way. So if the key and the value name are the same, we can do like this one. And there is a callback function. So the callback function is exactly the same like in login and in the registration, but there is some different information. So so let's start with the callback function. So first it will give us the auth error, right? So inside the error what we have to do is to let's copy this one, right? And auth0 parse hash error, right? And the second parameter is basically the result auth0 decoded hash, right? Okay, let me explain this one. So what actually this one is saying, like we need to mention the null also, right? Okay, so first of all what it will do is it will get the hash value, and once it will process this hash value, then it will call the this function, right? So in this function if there is any error, so we will receive the error in the first argument. Otherwise any information that is actually decoded and decoded from the hash we will receive in this result parameter, right? So so inside the callback what we have to do is to first check for the error. So if there is any error, so if error, yeah, so we need to, there is something wrong, right? And we have to log the error as well and just return, right? But if there is no error, then obviously we will get all the decoded hash, right? So if result, right? And inside this result we will get the most important part, that is basically the access token. So this is the token that we will use throughout our application to protect all the routes, to protect everything that we want to basically and that all the routes that we want the user, only authenticated user to use, right? So inside this result we have access token. So let me grab that token, access token. So this is the access token, right? And you can store this token somewhere in the local storage. Like I can mention all the necessary steps here. So store this token in local storage, okay, and then authenticate get application routes on the base of token, right? So yeah, so so next thing what we have to do is, if there is a access token, right, and we need to get all the user information, right? So we process the hash. If there is an error, we just log the error. If there is no error, then we will get the access token, and using this access token we can get the user information, right? So in order to get the user information, we can use the auth0 method, the same method. So auth.client.userinfo, and this will take an access token. So pass the access token, and inside the callback function, so there is an error, just like the other callback. There is a first argument is the auth0 error, and the second is basically the user information, right? So the profile, so you can see a auth0 user profile, right? Result column auth0 user profile, right? Okay, perfect. So let's do the next step. If there is an error, console.log, something went wrong in fetching user profile, right? And we can log the error and then return. But if there is no error, then obviously we will get all the necessary information in the result. And let's explore this one. So it contains lots of the useful information like name, nickname, picture, and everything that we basically need for the user, right? So if there is no error, then we can just log uh, user login successful, right? And we can log the profile. Obviously when this process will be successful, you will redirect to the home page or the dashboard page or whatever you want to redirect, right? So just for the demonstration purpose, we are not actually redirecting anywhere. So let's try this all process. So let me repeat this. So what is basically happening here? So first it will do login, and if the user is logging first time, for the very first time, so what it will do is, to if there is no error, if there is no error, then it will redirect back to this URL after giving all the necessary permission, this URL. And we have created a component here at this URL, and we first get the hash value, right? So we get the hash value, we call this function by passing the hash value, and this is first parsing the hash, and then redirecting to the callback function. So inside the callback function we do have an error as the first argument and the decoded hash as the second. So if there is no error, then obviously we will get the decoded result, and decoded result contains the access token that we actually need, and using this token we can get the user information, right? So let's try this process. So oops, so here we have some error inside the mm, seems like we have done something wrong here. So where it could be, so this is going to be here like console.log and this one result, yeah. Alright, so let's try this process again. We will let me create a new user like john@gmail.com, right? And password is basically password, register, and yeah, so the user is basically registered, and let me log in with this user. So John and password. So so it will first go to the auth0 permission dashboard. So it is asking for the permission, so I will accept this, and it redirected to the authenticate, and yes, perfect. So here is basically all our necessary information, right? All good. So that is all the auth0 process. That is basically using the embedded login. So we use the auth0 JS version 9 library, and we performed all the authentication, login, and the registration using the auth0. So the next thing, obviously, you have to store this token somewhere in the local storage, and perform all the routing, protected routing related stuff using this token, right? Um, so I think this is all about the auth0. So I already have used this auth0 much in a more elegant way in a separate project. I will share the code. I will share the GitHub repository as well, so you can get more idea about the auth0 auth0 authenticated hooks, how actually I'm protecting the routes, etc. So but the main idea is that if you have the access token, then you can store it and protect your routes anytime, right? So thank you so much, guys. If you have any query, you can just comment in my channel, right? So yeah, thank you so much. Bye bye.